everyone, welcome to another video. Today I'm going to be doing some tone-on-tone stenciling, and I'll be making this nativity card with Clair stamps. But first, if you don't already, you can follow me across social media. Those links are going to be down in the description box. And if you haven't already, you can subscribe to my channel down there as well. You can also click the like button if you enjoy this video. That always helps. So to start off with, I am using this stamp set right here, which is called The Reason from Clair Stamps. Now all the supplies, everything that I'm using is going to be listed down in the description box below. So if you have any questions about products, you can head down there and find all those answers. To start with, I need to do some die cutting. I die cut a piece of white cardstock with a large rectangle die. Then I took that same large rectangle, inlaid a smaller one right inside of it, and I'm going to cut that from some gold cardstock. That's going to allow me to create a frame for my white piece of cardstock. This is one of my favorite techniques for die cutting, just because you don't need a whole lot of supplies to do it, and it's a great way just to add a little frame around anything that you want to make your focal point. So in this case, I'll be stamping on that white cardstock, which I'll do now with my Mini Misty. To make sure that I get this image centered, I'm going to go ahead and line up my white piece of cardstock and put my gold frame over the top of that as well. That's going to allow me to center everything, make sure that I have my image exactly where I want it, because I do want this to kind of be hidden, the bottom of it, behind the bottom of that frame. I'm using my Mini Misty because this is a great way to really play around with your stamps, get the position perfectly before you stamp. It's also a great way to do double stamping, which I will do here. You don't really need to. Clair stamps are high quality photopolymer stamps that are made in the United States, and they work amazing. This is a brand new stamp. I haven't used it already. I will be using some VersaFine Clair Nocturne ink, which is one of my favorite black inks. And I'll be stamping that down onto my white cardstock. Like I said, this is a brand new stamp, so I'll go ahead and stamp it once. It wasn't quite as dark as I wanted it, so I'm using my Mini Misty. I can go ahead and open my lid back up, and I can ink it right back up, stamp it back down, and I know it's going to be in the exact same position that I stamped the first time, so I get this very dark impression that is great. And I'm going to be coloring on this with my colored pencils and my OMS or Gamsaw, whatever you want to call it. I'll be blending that out with my blending stumps, and I'm just going to go ahead and color. For these little angels, I did stamp these from the Reason stamp set as well, and I fussy cut those out with my scissors. However, if you have an electronic cutting machine, you get the free SVG cutting files automatically with Clair stamps. You do not have to pay anything extra. You just get them as a free download whenever you buy the stamp set. So if you do have one of those, you don't have to worry about fussy cutting any of the stamp sets. Every single stamp set comes with that cutting file. I don't have an electronic cutting machine. I really need to get one, but I went ahead and just fussy cut those out very, very simply. Then I'm going to go ahead and move on and start coloring in my little nativity scene. For my coloring today, like I said, I'm using colored pencils. These are the Leisure Arts colored pencils. Sometimes when I'm coloring in smaller images like this, I don't want a lot of color choices. It kind of overwhelms me, to be honest, and I never really know what to go with. So when I'm doing smaller images like this, I really like to just kind of stick with my smaller sets of colored pencils, color in those images, and blend them out with my OMS to get that really nice soft effect. So I did some purples, some blues, some greens, colored in the hair and the faces and the staff. And once the entire image was colored in, I wanted to add a little bit of softness around the image. So I took the lightest blue from the Leisure Arts set, and I just scribbled on some color around the image. Then I use a lot of OMS, and I just blend that out. Now if you want an even lighter concentration of color, just turn the pencil on its side and scribble a little bit of color and blend it out. I'll go ahead and test this with my frame to make sure I like the coloring. I've got it where I want it, and once that's good, I can go ahead and move on. Here's a closer look at how that coloring turned out once it's dry. With the OMS, it can look a little darker at first, but once that dissipates and dries, it only takes a few minutes, it looks a whole lot better. There's a final image. So with my coloring done, I wanted to go ahead and do my stenciling. I am using this stencil from the Crafters. It's called Spanish Tile, and I'm just going to go ahead and center that right over my A2 size piece of green, dark green cardstock. Now what I like to do is center that over, place a piece of tape down, and then I'll flip over my panel once I've got it centered on my paper. Then I can come in from behind, tape down my stencil and my paper together, then flip everything back over, and I'll remove that piece of tape on the front. This way I have no edges whenever I go in to do my stenciling, but I also don't have to make sure that I hold my stencil in place with my fingers. I'm very clumsy. I knock it around. There's no way I could get this just perfect without taping it down. So that's a good way to tape down your stencil without having to start with a really large piece of cardstock. Now for the tone-on-tone look, I'm going to go ahead and grab some Memento Olive Grove ink, and I'm using a makeup sponge to go ahead and dab this in. You can use any number of things. You can ink blend this on, you can brush this on, you can go straight from the stamp if you wanted to. But I like this look because it's going to soak into the paper, but it's got a really intense color. So it almost looks, when I remove this, looks like velvet across the paper with the tone on tone look, especially with this dark green color. It really is a gorgeous effect. So there, once I remove it, I've got this gorgeous stenciled tone on tone look that almost looks like a piece of velvet on my card. Now once I had that done and I removed my stencil and all the tape, it was time to start putting the card together. I started with the gold frame on my little colored piece. I added dimensional adhesive to the back of that. If you wanted to, you could just use some regular adhesive, liquid or other, and just make it a flat frame. I wanted to add that little bit of dimension. Then I went ahead and die cut a banner from some purple cardstock. I pulled that purple that I used in the coloring down into the banner to kind of tie everything in. I went ahead and heat embossed that with some Princess Gold embossing powder. Now this is Stampin' Up! Cardstock, and when I heat set on it, the color actually changed. You can see it in the video. Now it went back to its original color, but I don't know if anybody else seems to have that problem. It was really, really strange. I started heat setting it and it just completely changed to like a really light pink color. So I wanted to keep that in the video. If that happens to you, don't freak out. It will go back to its normal color. Here's a better picture of it once the heat has kind of set. This is after it's set for about a day. It did go back to its original color, thank goodness. Now I went ahead and grabbed my A2 top folding white card base. I attached some adhesive, plain adhesive, to the back of that stenciled panel, and I'll go ahead and pop that right on top of the card base. Now you could, if you wanted to, use a dark green card base and then you don't have to mess with attaching this. However, I like to keep a white card base so I don't have to do any panels on the inside for writing in my little messages or stamping on the inside as well. I went ahead, placed that stenciled panel down. Then it was time to start putting everything else on top of the card. Now I have my little, I almost put it on upside down, but I switched it around. I have my little framed colored panel. I attached double-sided adhesive to the back of that and put that in the top center of the card base. Then I've got my little banner that will go back to its original color, I promise, and I attached that with some dimensional adhesive right on top on the bottom there. For the little angels that I had colored in and fussy cut out, I put those right on top of either the left and the right side of the frame, just with some more double-sided adhesive. You could use liquid adhesive. You could even pop these up if you wanted to. There's a closer look at all the dimension and the different layers on this card. It really was a lot of fun to put that together. Also, I want to give you a nice look of the colored panel against that stenciling. I just love the way that stenciling with the tone on tone look. It really does look like velvet across the back of the card. Now, as you know, I do like to decorate the inside of my cards as well, so I grabbed some more images from the same exact The Reason stamp set that I used on the front of the card. I grabbed the Heaven and Angels Sing sentiment, stamped that with the Olive Grove ink right on the inside of the card. Then I used that little angel stamp, and I'll go ahead and heat emboss this on the inside. I'm using Versamark ink, and I'll just stamp that down. Now, whenever I stamp this down, I knew I wanted to go ahead and use the same Princess Gold embossing powder on the outside, but I did not get a good impression. I have to admit, I am not a good stamper. I've really gotten out of practice, because I use my Misty so much. But whenever I went to put on my embossing powder, it didn't want to stick to the legs and the little dress area. So here's a trick. I just dust off all the embossing powder and completely just remove everything. Then I go ahead and I take my embossing bag and I am going to dust this very, very, very generously over my stamped image of Versamark ink. Now this works better if you have a nice clean Versamark ink pad. I do not. Mine is old, or the one I'm using here is old and it's stained, so it had a little bit of color to the stamped image. If yours is nice and clear, it's not going to show up. But once you dust that embossing bag over it, it's going to take away the sticky of that embossing powder or that Versamark ink. So you can go ahead and stamp right over the top again. Try and line it up as best you can, but it is clear ink. It's not going to show a whole lot. Then I can put that Princess Gold embossing powder on and heat emboss a second time. And there I've got a better embossed image that didn't have that big mistake in it. There's a final look at the inside of the card and one more of the outside as I love it when I am able to put together the whole outside and inside of the card using only one stamp set. That happens with most Joy Clair stamps that I use. That's going to do it for me today. There are links on the left side of your screen you can click on. You can also subscribe to my channel over there if you haven't already. Thank you guys for watching and happy crafting.